to Beware Spoilers. I am Adam on a very tired, Very tired, Thursday morning. How's everyone doing today? My car's a little loud because I don't know why. It's not that cold out. It's just being dramatic. But last night I did watch the most recent 2 episodes of The Bad Batch. And the reason I say most recent 2 is because they put up a 2-part episode. 2 half-hour episodes. And I think this is the strongest 2 episodes of the season, because one of the things The Bad Batch does well, and I think it is at its strongest when it does this, is it goes and it takes context, it provides context, to things we already know happened. Like, we know that after the Clone Wars and after Revenge of the Sith and before A New Hope, they switched from a clone army to a conscripted army. But how that happened, we don't exactly know. We know that by the time we get to A New Hope, in that 19 years, there's no reference to the Confederacy. Now that is because we're talking about a prequel that came after the original, and then you end up with this thing where it's like, well, let's tell this story, based on things that are happening now. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you look at what's going on with all of that, they do a great job with little side things that do things like that. Now herein lies the big the big issue. This episode is one of the strongest of this season. This 2-episode arc is one of the strongest of the season because it does that. It takes the moments that we need clarity on, like beyond just okay, so they blew up the cloning facilities, so they have to go to a conscripted army. And it's like, now how does that rectify itself within the Senate as we know it? And I will say this, and I think I said it with Andor, where it's like, we're getting scenes in the Senate that are more interesting than any scenes in the Senate that we got in the prequels. Like, all of that stuff that we get is so interesting to watch and to see things unfold. And it's like, what we're seeing in the prequels is not quite as important in a weird way, despite the fact that it's going and it's leveraging the power of Palpatine. Here, it's all about, Here, it's all about, the idea that the Senate is, what's what I'm looking for here? The idea that, we are brokering power, to try and, the forces of good, quote unquote, are trying to keep Palpatine from having all the power that he should, because they are the people who believe in, basically they're what we would consider a conservative, now. Well, no, it's a weird situation, because, like, what we have is a weird separation of powers thing, where there's the Senate and there's the executive in the form of the Chancellor, although it's really closer to like a Prime Minister type system, where the Chancellor is more voted in by the by the Senate to be the one in charge. So it's closer to like a Prime Minister type system. And what we see is an expansion of governmental powers within. For the sake of American listeners, we'll call it the executive, but it's not really. Like, for the sake of the executive, we will expand they're expanding the power of the executive branch at the expense of the power of the Senate. They're taking away powers from the Senate and giving it to the executive. And I think this does kind of, to an extent, mirror real life, where it's not a common occurrence, but over the last 8 years, kind of, there's been an increase in number of bills that have been introduced that is the House and the Senate, the legislature, giving up power willingly to the executive. Now, the idea that, so all of that notwithstanding, what we have in this episode is this fight over, creating legislation to create a conscripted army. Because keep in mind, that was the other big issue, was that before the clones, and before the Emergency Powers Act, back during Attack of the Clones, there was no, there was no standing army of the Republic. The Republic was basically defenseless the entire time. So the question is, what do they do to get the ability to raise this army? And that was the Emergency Powers Act. Now, at this point, the Emergency Powers Act has expired because the war is over. So the Chancellor doesn't have the ability to do things unilaterally anymore, so it has to go through the Senate. So now what they're using the fear of another attack, and mid-rim and outer-rim systems talking about, look, we still have to deal with incursions well, not incursions, but we still have to talk about insurgents and other things of that similar design. And it's a problem. We need some kind of force from the Empire to be able to enact order and keep order in these systems. And it's a great kind of it's a great kind of system that they have in place for that, where it's like, okay, so now that we don't have the clones anymore, now we need we need a standing army. And I think that one of the things that this episode does really well, that I think that the prequels really don't, is that the prequels do a very surface level thing of making Palpatine seem like a master strategist. Whereas if you start to think about it for any longer than 7 seconds, it starts to come apart and be like, there's a lot of happenstance that happens along the way in this story that okay, it requires a lot of it requires a lot of fortunate luck on his part for the Empire to rise, where it's what was the game plan if Padme wasn't pregnant and going to die during childbirth? What was the game plan there? That was a requirement for his plan. But okay, was Palpatine hanging around Anakin and taking and poking holes in all of his condoms? It's okay, this is going to happen and this is going to happen, and now we have a plan. It is one of those things where there's a lot of thought that went into how it looks superficially, but not how the plan works in action. It's kind of like the scene in Return of the Jedi, where that opening, there isn't really a plan by any of the heroes, which is they had a meeting of all of these writers who work on Star Wars books and stuff, and they tried to break down what the plan was in the beginning of Return of the Jedi to rescue Han, and they couldn't come up with one, because it's there's no system here that makes sense, where it's okay, so Lando's gonna go in undercover, so they have Han. So what's going to happen is Luke is going to send R2 and C-3PO to try and trade them for Han. So if he says yes, then they have there isn't really a great plan here to set that whole thing up. So it's what they came up with was that there had to have been multiple different plans where everyone was kind of all right, fuck Han, we're going to go do something else. And then everyone went off on their own little tangent to try and get him, and then they all kind of ended up in the right place at the right time to do it, which I buy. But it's the same thing here. Now, this episode does make him look that way, because in the beginning I was oh, they're not going to show the Emperor at all, and his presence is going to be powerful enough to carry his will through the episode, and the whole episode being about there's this clone that was there on the day that Kamino was blown up, or that Tipoca City was blown up, and then again they're oh, it was destroyed in a storm, and then Bail brings up a good point where he's why the fuck would it have been destroyed in a storm? That city has lived on that planet for centuries and was built to be able to be submerged underwater. They planned for this. How does that happen? And it's a valid point. So all of that happens, and all of the they go through all of the, what could it be, what could have happened, how could this have happened, and all of that. And then this guy has his information, like, hey, by the way, the Empire bombed it from orbit. I was there, and they did it to destroy the cloning facilities, but they destroyed the entire city at the same time because they didn't have the precision to destroy just the cloning facilities. And it's like, okay, great, this is a good thing that they're explaining, is that it's like, oh, they covered it up, said it was a storm, no one really questioned it, because I guess a lot of people don't know what Kamino is to be able to say that. So as the episode goes on and we learn more and more about what's happening with them trying to expose the information that the Empire was behind the destruction of Takoba City, it's like, okay, so how do we tell this story with that? Like, how do we, get this information to the public, and like, who can we get on the record, and all of that? And it's like, okay, this is all great stuff, and they do such a great job with that. And then for it to end with the Emperor being like, all right, so look, what he did was terrible. Because that's the thing, too, that we have to address. We are not at cartoonishly evil Emperor yet, or cartoonishly evil Empire yet. We are still at the transition into that from the Republic, where it's like we don't have the Empire going in with military occupations in cities. We don't have that yet, and part of that is Andor, what we saw in Andor, where the idea that like to get people to rebel, we need to do small things that will make the Empire turn the screws on us and everyone else in the galaxy because they don't know who it is. So then when they do that, people's lives have become so untenable, they have no choice but to rebel. And that hasn't started to happen yet. So to an extent, Palpatine still does need to incrementally expand his power, because if he decided to just do it, unilaterally all at once, it would very obviously raise what's going on. So he still has to act as he did as Chancellor to an extent. So he's up there and he's like, look, what this guy did was wrong. He went rogue. He was not supposed to do this. Like, this was majorly fucked up what he did. So he will be punished. He did the wrong thing. He did not. And that was kind of alluded to earlier in the episode, where it's like, they go like, look, if you fuck up again, we're going to, you're going to be sorry for fuck up again, and this was that. But then on top of that, he managed to turn that to his advantage. Where this situation, he played it in a way, because he's a savvy politician, he played it in a way where no matter what happened, he comes out on top. And in this situation, what he does is he goes, look, it's what he did was horrible, but I am greatly concerned about the clones on the ships that went along with his orders without question. Like, we need to address that problem. Like, what? Like, if we have a situation where we have a standing army that will just do whatever a rogue operative says, that is scary. So that's what brings up now the idea of the Stormtrooper, and that's where the Stormtrooper comes from. And it's such a genius moment by Palpatine that it makes him look like the strategist that he was always portrayed to be, even if his plans never felt quite as deep or as well laid out as the movies made it seem like. It's a genius kind of moment by him to make him do that. And I think that, like, they could, like, that whole first episode, you don't see him there. He's not in the Senate chamber, and they make it seem like he's off doing something where it's like he can't be involved, and it's a negative. But it's like then he shows up in the next one, and it's great, and he has that great moment, and it's like, oh, this guy is a master manipulator. And it's like, the thing is, it's like the manipulation he does here is not through the Force. It's not some fantasy element. It is him just taking the situation and commanding it, which is what makes him such a great villain. If only the movies portrayed him that way. But I think we'll wrap up there for today. The Bad Batch is available on Disney Plus. You can watch it including your subscription. Today the Flash goes on. What's it called? Goes on on the CW app, so I can watch that. But also there is, what was the other one that I have to watch? The End of National Treasure. So I'll surprise everyone. Tomorrow we'll get one, the next day we'll get the other. And then, tomorrow we'll get one, Saturday we'll get The Last of Us, Sunday we'll get the other. Because I think I have it scheduled a Flash today, Flash tomorrow, National Treasure on Sunday, and I gotta look at the calendar because this whole thing's kind of fucked up because The Last of Us came out, which goes the whole thing out, and tomorrow evening we will be recording the next episode of Beware of 30-minute reviews and the next episode of Exploring Hyperspace Lanes. Josie and I, we will be doing what was it? What the fuck was it called? Empire Strikes Back for Exploring Hyperspace Lanes, and Ant-Man for Beware for 30-minute reviews. And those will be up Wednesday and Tuesday, respectively. And then tonight, I am recording an episode that will sum up the Nintendo Direct from yesterday. I have a little write-up about it all set up. I'm going to record it later today. I'm going to edit it tonight. And it'll be uploaded probably, late tonight. But yeah. Let's wrap up there for today. So, until our next episode, which will be tomorrow morning. Also, Magic Mike will be mixed in there at some point as well. So until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.